Welcome back to The Line. It's that moment you've all been waiting for. Our top story of 2018. For us, it was the blue wave that swallowed up New Mexico in the recent midterm elections. That blue wave also ensured New Mexico a lot of firsts. We elected one of two women who go to Congress next year as the first Native American females in the U.S. Congress. New Mexico's congressional delegation is also now entirely Democrat and also entirely made up of people of color. Also a first. But Mary, start with the flipping of the governor's office as well. Michelle Lujan Grisham's dominant victory over Steve Pearce. I'm not sure anyone saw it being that easy for her going into the election. What did that tell us about where New Mexico is at right now? What's in those numbers?
Oh man, lots of stuff. So I think, first of all, probably expected that she was going to win. She was a front runner, but you're right, by that margin was in June. I don't think that would have necessarily been the prediction.
Good point, yeah.
I think change is natural. Like you have one party and then the next comes in. I think also what we saw in New Mexico, which is now, mostly Democratic voters and then some moderate voters too, was, at least in this state, not all states in the country, there was a renunciation of the Trump administration. And so that, I think, might have spoken to her margin. I think Steve Pearce was running against quite a bit, not just Lujan Grisham, but obviously his predecessor, not saying that they're super tied together, but they're the same party. And then, he had been a supporter of Trump and had introduced Pence here. So he had a lot he was carrying.
That's a good point. That's
even
a fair
though
point. Outside of his native district, so to speak, it's a tough one, especially.
Yeah,
Exactly
yeah.
right. Andy, when you think about Mr. Pearce, and also let's throw in Gary Johnson as well, end of the line for both those individuals here. They've had a pretty good run here, but
I think to start off with Pearce, he just was recently elected as the Republican Party of New Mexico chair. So, I mean, to say that he's completely gone, you can't say. He's always going to be a piece for a while. I don't know what happens after that.
Sure.
Both Pearce and Johnson have sort of, not consistently, but their politics in New Mexico go back to the mid-'90s, both of them. And so it's hard to say what's going to happen. Gary Johnson told me multiple times in 2016 that was his last run. He told me multiple times in 2018 it was his last run. He also told me that it's that he can't be trusted, sort of sarcastically, that he can't be trusted on that question or his answer there. So I don't know. I think Gary Johnson's probably more likely to go back to skiing and traveling the world.
Consulting.
And I think Pearce and his supporters are still going to have a place in politics for a while in New Mexico.
Also, depending on what Mr. Pearce's polling shows him in his district 2 years or a year from now.
Right, that's what, Harry Teague kind of held that spot for a while, and then Pearce moved back in. So
Exactly right. I mentioned Deb Haaland, of course, in passing, not by name, Jeff, and a pretty big deal around here. She ran a very interesting campaign. Janice Arnold-Jones, no stranger to this table, of course, it was her opponent. She made some inopportune comments about Ms. Haaland's background. How was that race when you look back on it now? How did that all play out when you see that?
Honestly, I thought the primary was a particularly interesting
That's a good point.
Primary race on the Democratic side. She beat a number of folks who I think maybe 2 years ago, if you had asked how would this all shake out if you threw these 4 or 5 names into the hat, would Deb Haaland be the one who emerged from that primary? I think people would have said no. So I thought that was a very interesting primary, and it was kind of a primary about ideas. It wasn't a particularly in the mud or nasty primary, so that was an interesting race to watch. I'd have to say that I was pretty surprised by some of the things that Janice Arnold-Jones said, and her response when she was sort of called to the carpet for that also was surprising to me. I don't know that it played a huge role in terms of the fact that Deb Haaland was elected. I think that was a foregone conclusion when she emerged from that primary. I think that she was always going to win that race. I don't know that Janice's comments sunk her proverbial ship in that race. So those are my thoughts on that.
Good point there. Inez, there's always a wild card we talk about here at New Mexico in Focus, and that is ranked choice voting was so fascinating for us to watch from Albuquerque. And now there's like talk of maybe this could work out elsewhere. Maybe this could, Maine's doing it, but what was what I don't know is how that worked out, the feedback afterwards. Were folks generally okay with how that all turned out? Do folks feel like it was a fair process, first of all?
I think that they felt that it was fair.
Yeah.
Some people really, really didn't like it, and they still don't like it, and they probably never will like it. And a lot of those probably supported Ron Trujillo, who was running for mayor.
Right.
What I saw, observing it, is that it forced the candidates to be civil to each other,
Right.
because you did not want to offend someone whose second choice vote you wanted. Right. And while that got the campaign a little boring, it was really nice, because that could have been a very ugly race. Mm-hmm. As a way to differentiate, whether it was through direct spending or through some kind of a PAC coming through. Mm-hmm. So it really made the mayor's race about issues and about approaches to solving problems, and that was just a relief. And what I love about it as a voter is that you vote your heart, and then you vote your rational choice second.
Gotcha.
So sometimes that's the same choice, but not always. So this really gets rid of the idea that you're going to vote for the lesser of two evils. Mm-hmm. And if there's something we need in American politics, is a reason to vote for as opposed to vote against. Mm-hmm. And it gives us that.
Absolutely. Let me stay with you and get back to this blue wave. I just wanted to get that in about ranked choice. It's so fascinating. The delegation, the entire delegation made up of people of color. Mm-hmm. That's so fascinating to me. Talk to that a little bit. It's so interesting.
That was one of those things. Election night, I was working a radio show, and we started talking, and I was looking at something on Twitter, and all of a sudden I said, oh my gosh, mm-hmm. this means everybody is a minority. And actually, if Yvette had won, since she's a registered member of the Cherokee Nation, right. It would have been all three as well. It just was this amazing feeling, and it speaks to New Mexico as a diverse place, and the people who represent us, a lot of them look like us. Mm-hmm. And our two senators, of course, are Anglo men, mm-hmm. which for a long time has been most of the people we had in office. Mm-hmm. So having a female governor, having two women congressional leaders, and then having Ben Ray Lujan, who's now the fourth in the House of Representatives. He's the, what do they call it, assistant leader or something?
Something like that,
So the highest position any New Mexican has ever had in Congress. And I think it shows that when you run candidates who have ideas and who aren't there to represent special interests, but represent, people, mm-hmm. you might win some races. Mm-hmm.
The high turnout in the midterms, we talked about this last week or a couple of weeks ago on the show. It turned out this was this gray wave as part of the blue wave, you know what I mean? A lot of older folks voted, but that's okay. But the turnout did mean something. Is that going to carry over for folks? And what do Democrats need to do to keep that kind of thing going?
I think that the voter turnout, again, I think we were talking at this table, like Deb was a foregone, you felt like Deb was a foregone winner. Mm-hmm. She was running a year of women. Mm-hmm. There used to be the saying that all politics is local, but now it's all national.
That's right.
And so New Mexico actually maybe didn't have some sort of high-profile Senate race where it would have brought out the whole state, mm-hmm. and it was so close, and that would have, that's what drove higher voter turnout in a lot of other states. But yet, I think, again, saying all politics is maybe sometimes national, there was just this kind of, I think, massive get-out-the-vote push on a national, state, and local level for Democrats to show that this election was a rebuke of the Trump administration and a way to counter 2016, which let's not forget that they took some massive losses. And, right. Democrats take this with them, but politics has its waves. So
That's right.
We'll see what happens.
That's right. Our legislature on the House side, of course, a lot of seats got picked up by Democrats. What's the sense there as you look at it early?
I think it's going to be kind of a repeat of previous years. Kind of like what Mary talked about before was that a new party comes in, things change, and it's sort of like this cyclical motion. And I think that there's a number of things that the Democrats are going to try to jump onto now that they have a majority in both houses and the governor's office. But I think we'll also see some surprises. I think that also brings in some diversity as far as Democrats go. You've got the kind of progressive Democrats and more conservative. Mm-hmm. And so it'll be interesting to see how those conversations go and how that lines up with the governor's view on things.
Right. Mandate, a lot of folks are saying that word. That blue wave was so solid. Numbers, in the House are so big. Do folks have to respond to that blue wave in some way at this point?
I mean, I certainly think they believe that it's their prerogative to respond in that way. And if you
Yeah.
look at the margins and the pickups and the way the state went on election night, I think that's a fair enough word. It's another one of those sort of political words that I don't think means a whole lot anymore. But
right.
yes, we all saw what happened in terms of the results on election night. And as much as it was a blue wave and a gray wave, we also saw a huge number of women get elected in New Mexico, and not just to political office, right? I mean, just look at what happened to the Court of Appeals, where we had 5 competitive races for the New Mexico Court of Appeals, 5 Martinez Republican-appointed men running against 5 Democratic female challengers. All the incumbents lost. So it'll be really interesting to see if that changes in some way, the sensibility of that court, or the come from of that court, or the function of that court. So I think it's important to remember that it wasn't just blue and maybe a little bit gray, but women picked up an awful lot of seats in New Mexico
I'm
too.
glad you got that in, absolutely. Inez, who is at the top of the heap of the blue wave? Is it the governor's Democratic Party here was it Mr. Udall's? Is it Mr. Heinrich? Who owns this blue thing now?
Boy, that's a good. I think it has to be the governor.
Yeah.
Because Heinrich was at the top of the ticket in terms of, federal to state.
Sure.
But she was the face of the party. She pushed Michael Padilla out. She
right.
got
Hard to
Richard
say.
Ellenberg to quit. So she exercised her power along the way. And now she's the person who's going to be passing the laws that hopefully fix these problems. I mean,
right.
you asked, how do you get turnout to continue this high? You make voters feel like if they vote for you,
That's right.
you do what you promised.
I appreciate that. Now, that's all the time we have this week. Be sure to weigh in with your list of the top stories of 2018 at NewMexicoInFocus.org. You can always reach out to us at NM In Focus on Facebook and Twitter.